Here's why you should never set a maximum ISO on your camera. My name is Amri. My online photography lessons have helped hundreds of thousands of people learn photography. Let me tell you why it's an incredibly bad advice to limit your camera's ISO and what would be a far better solution. Okay, truth to be told, nobody likes noise, and raising ISO too much will obviously introduce noise. Long story short, you want to avoid high ISO settings if you can. Many people will tell you that it is a good idea to set a maximum ISO in your camera menu, so that you never get above the one ISO level that you personally feel creates acceptable noise levels. So let's do that. Let me set a maximum ISO of 3200. Okay, now I'll go shooting my neighbor's boy Tony playing basketball indoors. Please ignore the wig, I was pretending to be beginner wolf for my online photography course. By the way, if you like learning with a mix of bad humor, you might want to check out that course. I'll link you to that at the end of the video. Back to the photos. The gym is really badly lit, so I am in an extreme low light situation. Basketball is a fast moving sport and I want to freeze the motion. So let me set 1/1600th of a second for shutter speed. Let's assume I'm using a kit lens, so my aperture number can get lower than f/5.6 and my ISO is capped at 3200. What do I get? This shot. So what choices do I have? I could obviously choose a slower shutter speed. While that's risky and I will get the one or the other shot with motion blur, I might get away with 1/800th of a second. Well, my shot is still way too dark. Choosing an even slower shutter speed is a pretty bad idea, particularly for beginners, and the aperture is at its limits. Some will now say that you should just shoot and push the brightness in your editing software. And that's a really bad idea. While the raw images of some cameras will cope with that very well, it's still better to get it right in camera. And for all other cameras, it's an extremely bad idea altogether. So let me remove that ISO cap and forget that crappy advice. In almost every situation we will ever photograph, we depend on the light we have available. The exception is obviously when we are able to add light, for example with a flash. So we can't just ignore that. Many people ignore the light though because they have learned the exposure triangle. And that doesn't even mention the importance of light for exposure. So how do you best set ISO? Now there's two ways to get the best possible ISO setting. For both methods you need to first and foremost max out the light you can get into your camera. That is first by choosing the optimal shutter speed. In low light situations that is basically the slowest shutter speed that will give you at least a few keepers. And second, basically using the lowest aperture number your lens supports. That will block the least amount of light by opening the aperture as much as possible. If you have that maxed out, you can first set the ISO manually until you get the desired image brightness. In a controlled environment like the gym we have been shooting in, that's a good idea as the light won't change much. But what about conditions where the light constantly changes? That could for example be an outdoor sports event at night, because most venues are not lit like professional stadiums and only have 4 lights maximum. If you're close to one of those lights, you will get a lot more light than if you're further away. A quick side note in this regard, don't get frustrated if it's raining during a sports event. Particularly when you shoot against the light, you can get some cracking shots. And yes, sometimes an umbrella is better than a rain cover for your camera, particularly when it's windy. But back on topic. In these cases, you don't want to set the camera manually because the light changes fast and even the best pros can't keep up with that. The best solution in that case might be a bit weird for some, but it works perfectly. Here's how I go about it. I weirdly set my camera to aperture priority. Why? Because I know that I will have to choose the lowest f number my lens supports anyway, no matter how bright or dark the light gets. For sports, I basically use the lowest f number all the time, as I like to separate my subjects from a background as much as possible. Next, I set auto ISO. Without a cap, by the way. If I need a high ISO to get the shot, I have no other choice. And finally I go into my camera menu to activate a very hidden function with a very weird name, ISO Auto Min SS. And I choose, let's say 1/2000th of a second. What does it do? It tells the camera what the lowest shutter speed is that I can live with. It will never go below that, but rather raise ISO instead. Except for the very rare situations where the scene is so dark that you'd still get an underexposed image, like in this case where I have my lens cap on. And talking about shutter speeds, if you subscribe to my email list, I will send you a cheat sheet about which shutter speeds are safe and which are the absolute minimum. A link to that is in the description. So my exposure is now basically on autopilot, but I still took full control over all the settings. Because if there is enough light, the camera doesn't need to raise ISO, and if there is too little light, raising ISO is the only chance to get a decent shot. Not all cameras will support that function, but if they do, it's usually under ISO settings and is roughly called minimum shutter speed. If you can, go for it. It makes life much easier. Another tip. I have set that function to my quick menu so that I have fast access. You could even use a custom button if you want to change it frequently. I owe you the link to my photography course. Go to wolfamri.com or check the link in the description if you want to learn photography fast with the easiest explanations possible.